So in the last few lessons I've been showing you how to use functions, variables and if statements, and I want to pull together all those different concepts into an application which I'll show you how to create. It will take more than one lesson to show you this, so I'll be showing you in this lesson and the next lesson how to put this particular application together. And what it does is it selects itself a number between 1 and 100, and then you try to guess what that number is. So I've typed in 15, that's too low. I've typed in 90, that's still too low. 99 happens to be correct. So I'll also be giving you a project to do. It's going to be a timer, but I'll give you that in the next lesson, and then in the lesson after we'll be looking at how to incorporate the timer into this game. So I've set up an ActionScript file, and I've created a background, and I've put on it some rectangles with different colours, and I've locked that layer, and then I've created a new layer, and I've put text on that layer. You can see all the different things that are on that layer. I've embedded the text to make sure it's viewable on every computer. This first text box I want to be accessible in ActionScript so that I can look at the guess number. So I've given that an instance name, and I've also given it a type of input text. That means I can edit the text when I have the application compiled. I have another text box here. I've called it info text. That's dynamic text. It can be edited by ActionScript. I've also created two buttons and given those instance names: submit button and reset button. So I've got all this set up, but I haven't got any ActionScript yet. So I'm going to go Window, Actions, and the first thing I want to do is to set up mouse event listeners for the two buttons, because that's an obvious thing that needs to be done with this software, so it's a good place to start. So submit button, add event listener, mouse event, make it a click mouse event. I've chosen to call the function on submit. Now writing the function, you'll see that it has the same structure as a usual function. So it has an input, which in this case is a mouse event type of variable. I could call this something else if I wanted to, and I can refer to that within the function. It doesn't have an output, so it doesn't have a return statement. And I can test to see if it works using an using a trace function. If I go control test and I test it, you can see it's working there. And I need to do exactly the same for the reset button. So I'm just copying and pasting to avoid introducing any errors that I might introduce by retyping everything. You can test this one works as well. For some reason that isn't doing. Okay, that's because I haven't changed that. Always a good idea to test it to make sure everything's working. And I can see it is. So the next thing I want this software to do is to select a number, because what I want the software to do is when I guess a number, it has to have something to guess, to test the guess against. It has to know a number in its own software. It has to have a variable somewhere that contains a number that I'm trying to guess. So I'm going to call it number to guess. I'm going to make it an int type of variable because it's a whole number that I'm trying to guess. I could, if I wanted to, make it a fixed number. But that would be a boring game because every time you played it, it would be the same number. So instead of doing that, I'm going to show you a new function of the math object. You can look at it in LiveDocs if you want information about it. It's called mathRandom. And I'm going to use the trace function. I'm going to cut and paste that into the onSubmit just to show you how it works. So when I press on submit, it's going to trace the output of the random function. So you can see those are some random numbers it's creating there. They're all between 0 and up to 1, but not including 1. And they're all numbers with a large number of numbers after the decimal point. So there's going to have to be some changes before I can make it a number between 1 and 100, the whole number. First thing I'm going to do is to multiply it by 100. Now you can see, because I've done that, each of these random numbers is being multiplied by 100. So it's looking like it's in the right kind of range. Although because the random number I'm multiplying goes from 0 up to 1 but not including 1, that means when I multiply it by 100, the numbers that result are going to be from 0 up to but not including 100. Whereas I want it to go from 1 and include 100. There's a number of ways I could deal with this. I'm simply going to add 1 to it. The output's going to look very similar. If I click enough, you might see 100, but I'm not going to spend all day doing that. And the final thing I want to do is to change it into an int. I could cast it into an int. So you can see there I've got the right kind of numbers being created randomly. I could also use a function called mathFloor if I wanted to, instead of casting it to an int. That does exactly the same thing. So I'm going to use that particular function instead of 37 to store the result of this mathRandom. I'll change that back to an int again. It stores the result of this mathRandom multiplied by 100, has 1 added to it, it's casted to an int, it's being stored in this variable. I'll just cut and paste that trace. You'll be able to see when I test the program, a random number has been selected at the start. So now I have a number to guess in my program. So what do I want the program to do with this number to guess? So when I guess my own numbers, I want it to compare the number I guess with the number that it has selected, the number to guess. So I wanted to compare this value with this value, and then I want it to say something in this box, either it's too high or too low. So let's create a new variable that's going to hold the contents of this box. I'm going to make it a number rather than an int this time. Var my guess number. I'm just going to declare it, I'm not going to do anything else with it. Why am I choosing to use a number rather than an int? Well, because I could put in a number with a decimal point. Could put a number like that. Could even put in some text. So what I need to do with this number is to test that it is in fact a number that I'm dealing with before I do anything else with it, because I can't compare some text. I can't compare some text with this integer. It has to be a number, and before I can make this test. So there's a function I can use to test that out. It's called isNaN. But before I use that, I want to store the contents of the guess box here, which I've called guessText, inside this variable. So my guess equals, I'm going to cast it to a number, guessText.text. The text property gives the string inside the text field. It's casted to a number and stored in this number. You recall that the variable scope means that if I declare it outside, it's available from the point I declare it, so it's not available above that point. It's available from the point I declare it all the way downwards through the program. If I had declared it inside this onSubmit function, I would have access to it from the point I declare it until the function closes, but then I wouldn't be able to refer to it outside. So I've chosen in this case to give it a scope that includes outside the onSubmit function. And I'm going to use an if statement to find out if that number is a number or if it's not a number. isNaN my guess equals false. So if it is a number, isNaN is going to be false, because this tests to see if it is NaN, which means not a number. If it's NaN, it says it's true. If it's actually a number, it comes out with false. So if NaN, my guess, is false, the if statement will resolve this whole statement, and it will say is false exactly the same as false, and it will say yes, that statement is true. So it's going to say my trace function is a number, because I just want to test it out. I'm going to put an else in, which is going to run in the event that this is not a number. It's not a number. So if I control test that now, and I put in here a number, and I submit that, it says it is a number. If I put in a capital G, it says it's not a number. So I'm going to leave the lesson there. I will just summarise what I've done so far. I've set up event listeners for the two buttons. So the submit and the reset button have event listeners added to them. Functions here correspond to the functions here. So when they're clicked, the function is run. The software has set up a random number and it's stored it in this this variable here, number to guess. I had to use mathrandom to create the random number, and I had to multiply that by 100 and add 1 to it and cast it to an int in order to get the right range of numbers, and also to make sure they're whole numbers. Then I'm taking my guess from the input, the guess input, guess text field. I'm casting that string into a number, storing it in this variable I've declared, and then I'm testing it in an if statement to make sure it is a number. And then in the next lesson I will be processing that number to check to see how it compares with number to guess.